Welcome, brothers and sisters, to a powerful panel discussion this afternoon titled A Call to Activism. Brought to you by Space for Creators, iOne Digital's new video streaming platform for content creators who are highlighting untold stories and marginalized communities, and the South Metro Atlanta chapter of 100 Black Men of America Incorporated. My name is Will Ayers. I'll be moderating part of the discussion. A Call to Activism is a three-part conversation that includes content creators, very talented content creators from around the country, in addition to well-respected community leaders who are out on the front lines championing Black communities. They'll be discussing three topics this evening, which include the role that media plays in activism, how to use your voice to create change, and advocacy in the community. Now, before we take a deep dive into this powerful conversation, we're going to take a look at a powerful piece by a very talented brother, award-winning filmmaker, brother Yaki Smith. He currently has a web series that's streaming right now on the spaceforcreators.com that's titled The Beginning and Ending of Everything. He is also an educator at the University of Texas. This piece is called Dear Bruh.
Dear bruh, I miss you more than ever today. I already mourn losing you, but today, for some strange reason, the gravity of your death hit me like a ton of bricks.
Almost knocked me over. The knowledge that everything you could have been, that everything God designed you to be, was taken away from you because your very presence made you a threat. The thought of that paralyzed me. The fact that you were executed merely because of the deep, intangible, soul-stirring hatred of your being, because of the fear of your excellence, simply because of the total disregard for your right to live. That really confused and angered me.
I'd probably never tell you this face to face, because that's not how we do. But in some hidden, deep place in my heart, I ached. I ached because I realized that when they killed you, they killed a piece of me too. Your death was not singular. It's happening again and again, carried out to remind me of where I stand, of who they perceive me to be, of what will happen if I ever step out of line, if I ever demand to be seen as a human,
as equal, as worthy of living in the world. Your last words haunt me. They torment me in my sleeping, in my waking, in my moving through the universe, because they could very well be my last.
Why are you following me?
It's not real.
Why you shoot me?
Please don't let me die. I can't breathe.
That was Dear Bruh, written and directed by brother Yaki Smith. Before I toss it over to you, I just want to ask you, I know that you do a lot of work in the community as an educator and as a filmmaker as well, but what inspired you to write and direct Dear Bruh?
Yeah, man, you know, I wrote that in 2014, during the Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner cases, and I was compelled to write it because there was just a deep pain I felt every time I had to read those stories of Black men being murdered in the streets. And I wrote that, one, for me to process that pain, but also to give other people a vehicle to process their pain as well.
I love it. I love it, man. It's a powerful piece. Thank you for all of the great work that you continue to do and will do in the future. And I'm not going to talk you guys' head off. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you to moderate part one of the discussion.
Oh, good, brother. Appreciate you. All right. So first, I just want to say, thanks to 100 Black Men of America and a Space for Creators, one, for inviting me to moderate, but also for finding value in creating a forum for us to not only discuss these timely and pressing issues, but really to talk more specifically about how activism, art, and media must be in conversation with one another in the fight for social justice and the eradication of white supremacy and racism. And to that end, I just want to jump right in and introduce our two panelists who I have the pleasure of talking to tonight. First being John Armstrong. Johnny Armstrong is the CEO of 100 Black Men of America Incorporated, a nonprofit organization that serves to improve the quality of life and enhance educational opportunities in Black communities. 100 Black Men of America Incorporated is also recognized as the nation's top African-American-led mentoring organization for young Black males. Armstrong has been recognized as a seasoned leader with a proven record of success in multiple nonprofit organizations aimed to empower and educate Black communities. Welcome, brother.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here tonight.
Awesome. And next, I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Dante Carter. Dante Carter is a public relations professional that has served as the served as the publicist for attorneys representing victims in the R. Kelly case and civil rights attorneys around Atlanta fighting social injustice. Previously, he worked for the Fulton County District Attorney's Office and spent 10 years as an anchor and reporter for CBS 46 and 11 Live in Atlanta. Welcome, brother.
Thank you so much. Proud to be here.
And actually, Dante, I actually want to start with you. And I want to start by telling a little story here. Okay, it's a story that we're all familiar with. And it starts with, on February 22nd, 2020, a young man named Ahmaud Arbery went for his daily jog. And on said jog, he stopped and looked inside of a home that was under construction, probably admiring the layout, the square footage, imagining, as we all have done, that maybe one day this property would be his, right? Yeah. Then he left said house and continued on his jog, only to be hunted down and killed by 3 white vigilantes. Now, these men, after they killed this man in cold blood, claimed that Ahmaud attacked them, that they thought he had a weapon, that he fit the description of someone who was robbing homes in the neighborhood. And they even went so far as to tell the media that the homeowner of the property that was being constructed asked him to look after the property. Now, it seems that every time a Black man is killed, and we can go back to Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, there's always an immediate smear campaign, right? This guy was this dude was that. And I know in your work as a publicist that mainly focuses on cases centered on social justice issues, what is your role in rewriting that negative narrative that is immediately put out in the media when these types of crimes happen?
My role is giving these young men a voice. I think a lot of people, a lot of times we hear so much about how difficult the police jobs are, how difficult their jobs are, what they have to lose. But the reality is crime rates across this nation are all down. You know what I'm saying? But the stigma and the fear that's still placed upon Black men is still very much alive. And there's a pressure. We can't, this has been a stigma, this danger, this threat has been placed on us. I mean, since the moment we first came to this country. And I love the quote of how the hunter will always be celebrated until that lion has a voice. And that's my purpose. That's what I feel like my purpose is to give these young men who have been hunted a voice. Ahmaud Arbery was hunted. I was one of the first people to see that cell phone footage when I was helping the attorneys in that case. And my heart broke. I was holding on to my daughter and I kind of fell to the floor and I just started crying. And when you see the pieces of his back fragment that are shooting across the screen as he's hit time and time again with those shotgun bullets, like those images I cannot erase from my mind. And, it's so funny, but, gosh, me and some of the attorneys, we went down to Brunswick. We marched through 6 counties with his mother. many of the church folks there. And we made her a promise. We're going to get justice, and that's not something that we take lightly at all. We understand that what was taken from her can never be replaced, and we're going to work. We're going to work our hardest to make sure that these parents understand that, look, they've got some fighters here, some folks that are going to make sure that their sons' names are remembered, and that you're not just going to kill a black man and then start a smear campaign. Nothing they did deserved death.
And that's interesting because when we think about these smear campaigns and the ways in which they are constructed, it does become very difficult, right, to begin to rewrite that negative image that is put out in the media. And as a publicist, I know you said it's to give them voice, but how do you approach that? Like, how do you sort of begin to construct the narrative that is going to counter the negative narrative that has already been put out there?
I think one of the things that I love to do is just spend time with the family. I want to get to know these individuals through the eyes of their family. And I think that's the most important thing. You see these smear campaigns and you hear the things that are said about these young men, but we don't often hear from the parents just what these young men brought to their lives. And that's the element that I really focus on is, who were they? And what did they mean to these families? Because if you took me from my mother, there would be hell to pay. And I think we got to get to this point of us fighting for these young men even after death. And that's what I'm focused on. It's so crazy. I had a conversation with my mother, and I have conversations with her a lot as these cases come across my desk. And I remember we were talking about this case, and she said, I still remember the first black man that was killed by police the day you were born. And I just sit back and I think about the trauma that she's had to hold on to for so many years, just worrying about her son. I remember being a young man and seeing Rodney King. Like these aren't just one-off situations. These are things that continue to occur. And at some point, these things have got to end. And if we got to fight a little harder to make sure that happens, that's what we're willing to do.
Awesome, brother. And John, I kind of want to jump to you because, Black Men of America, 100 Black Men, you all are really mentoring youth, Black youth, right? You are really trying to sort of position them for success. Yeah. And I'm curious to know that when these things happen, right, when there is an Ahmaud Arbery and a Breonna Taylor and a Rashard, like when all of these things happen, what are the conversations like with these young people? Yeah, we're preparing you for success, but in many ways, suited up, sagging GED, PhD, your life could be taken from you via racialized violence. How do you frame that conversation with your young people?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to be very honest with them. And I think at times we try to camouflage things. And as young Black males, one of the things that I look at when we talk to these young people is, unfortunately, the same conversations my dad had with me when I was a young boy, we're still having to have these same conversations with our kids today. And that's sad that we're still having the same conversations about carry your ID, how do you respond if you're stopped by police, things of that nature. But what we do at the 100, part of the mentoring process, we go through skills and training with them how to respond if you are stopped by the police. We actually will take them through drills, just the same way you do in sports, anything of that nature, because the biggest thing is we want these young men and also young ladies to be able to get home. And then you can be able to tell your story and solicit the help that you need to get. Because oftentimes they don't get home. And if they don't get home, they don't have an opportunity to tell those stories. But our motto at the 100 is what they see is what they'll be. And one of the things that we harp on with these young people is part of what they see is what they'll be is us being open with them and letting them know, yes, I may be a doctor now, I may be a businessman now, I may be an attorney right now, but guess what? I didn't start off this way. Maybe I passed, maybe I failed the bar exam, a couple of times. Maybe I felt organic chemistry. And I think when we can show that side of ourselves with these young people, it allows them to trust us. It allows them to feel like they can share sometimes intimate things with us, just beyond going out playing baskets or going to a ball game or something of that nature. But they can share stories with us in terms of, hey, what they might have been confronted with in terms of potential violence amongst other kids, or what they may have encountered at school or on the job or something of that nature. So we have to create an environment that allows them to feel comfortable enough to share these things with us as men. So that's kind of our approach. We try to tell them as much as we can without scaring them, but also giving them a good solid foundation and letting them know that we love you and we're going to support you in any type of way possible. But most importantly, we want you to be able to talk to your kids down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I remember I was at a conference one time, and they were teaching the young men how to respond to the police, right? They played a video of a stop and, well, what did my man do wrong? Should he have said this or that? And here I am in the back, and I raise my hand and I immediately say, wait. Well, what about the cop, right?
Yeah.
Who's training the cop with how to deal with me when he stops me versus me having to learn how to deal with him? And so I'm gonna shoot this back to you a little bit. And as you're having those conversations with them about how to respond to cops, what about the other side of that? Because I think of my man Ahmad, for example. Obviously, these are white vigilantes who hunted him down, but my man he's just jogging. He's just going down the street jogging. How do we grapple with that? This whole notion of what we're supposed to do in the presence of cops or white vigilantes versus their responsibility to us.
Yeah, one of the things that we have begun to do at the 100 is to try to create an environment in which the young person's first encounter with a police officer is not a negative encounter. So we have worked with NOBLE, which stands for National Organization of Black Law Enforcement. Work with them to help them, bring them in, be part of the mentoring aspect. We also are looking to start a partnership with the Police Athletic League. And we stress during these interactions with the young people, please don't wear your uniforms, because oftentimes when a young person sees a uniform, they could get a certain just mindset right away. So we want them to be able to see the cops in a different light. Oh, okay, that's Mr. Smith who actually helped me with my math homework. Oh, that's Mr. Smith who actually went out and took me fishing. So getting a chance to see them in a different environment, I think that helps immediately on both ends in terms of relationships. But I also feel like police officers should be required to do continuing education training. I was on a town hall meeting, and it said it's ironic that a police officer will take a psych exam as he or she goes through the academy before they can become certified to become an officer, but it's only required once. And they work the street for a number of years, but they can't continue to be a police officer if they aren't certified at the gun range, something that they maybe have to do twice a year or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think police officers and counties and different jurisdictions need to require some type of ongoing continuing education to not only understand from a mental aspect, because they see a lot on the street. I mean, they see a lot and they deal with a lot on the street. And I think it's imperative that they get a chance to get that continuing education, not only in terms from a mental health standpoint, just for their well-being, but also the way that dynamics of communities change. What was a neighborhood 20 years ago may look totally different from what it looks like, 20 years ago. And if that police officer has been in that neighborhood, it's a different type of policing. One of the things I will say, I'm 48 years old, and I remember when your parents just simply said to you, well, because I said so. That was all the explanation you needed. And Lord knows you definitely didn't respond back. But today's generation of youth, they pose questions and they want explanations. And sometimes that can be viewed as being disrespectful and it's not, because it's fair. They look at things differently from what they've learned different. So it's a very different perspective. So that's why it's vital that police officers go back and get that training and understand that, hey, because I questioned, well, why did I get pulled over? It's not necessarily me being disrespectful. I just kind of have to understand my rights. I know within in my rights. And that's why I'm questioning this. I mean, again, I see it even when I see a staff person that I hired that graduate right from college. And I'm like, well, you know, when I came out, I was just happy to have a job. Lord knows I didn't say a word for the first 10 months in the staff meeting because I was like, no, it's not my time to talk. So I think it's real important that we all understand that continuing education is really vital to help de-escalate these situations, and hopefully these situations won't happen.
All right. Well, you know, to that end, I have a question for both of you, and you know, just jump in. You know, in terms of policing, I'm curious. There's this whole push for defunding the police, right? And I obviously have my thoughts on that, which I can share after you speak. But I'm curious to know: do you think that the police can be saved, or do you think that we need to, in many ways, dismantle policing and find a new way, right, to introduce policing into society? Because we think about the history of policing, right? Slave catchers and things of that nature, right? Policing has always been about surveilling Black bodies, dehumanizing Black bodies, and controlling Black bodies. So can we expect an institution that literally from its inception was built to kill us, to dehumanize us, to really sort of send us to the fringes of society? Can we expect that organization or that institution to ever see us as fully human? Or are we actually kind of going around in a circle by thinking that we can fix an institution, again, that in many ways may not be broken?
You know, I will say, when you say defund the police department, that's a very broad statement.
It is.
It's a very broad statement. And I'm in full agreement of how you reallocate those funds, because oftentimes a police officer may be called out to deal with somebody, a homeless person, or a person that has some mental challenges, where that police officer may not really be the best person to have those type of conversations with those individuals. You need somebody with a certain skill set, a certain training that could probably cope with the situation a little bit differently. So how can you take some of those funds that are currently going to police officers and reallocate them for social services to where you could have a mental health specialist that are with the police? Now, oftentimes you see on police forces, they'll have a chaplain. And when there's a situation, that chaplain may go to a certain situation and pray with the officer or whatever it may be. And it may be a situation where we can take some of those funds and hire social workers. We can take some of those funds and hire counselors to help with these people that have these various types of issues where it's not necessarily a police issue. So I would say I'm about all about how we reallocate those funds to be used in a different type of way. So I'm a firm believer opposed to militarizing the police and giving them the latest gear to deal with somebody that really just may need somebody to talk to, or somebody that needs their medication. We don't need to go put on the riot gear to deal with that person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, another part of that question is how many of these corporate airlines do you hear of having bad pilots? You know what I'm saying? Who would fly if they knew they had, if they knew they had bad pilots? Who would fly? I wouldn't fly. And I think that's part of this equation that we've got to get to. We've got to have a serious conversation about is what is going on here? What is wrong within this system? There are many of these systems that were created that we live through right now that were not built for the diversity in America right now. So how do we address it? How do we start to peel back these layers and start to look at how do we make these systems work for all of us that represent the diversity of this country? And so, John, I love the points that you mentioned about reallocating funds. But I mean, I think it's, we got to get deep in there. Obama had commissioned this study, 21st Century Policing Initiative, where we had Dr. Cedric Alexander, who was a former police chief in DeKalb. He was a part of that study. And one of the things that they talked about was having police policies that reflect the values of the community. And my question is, like, out of all these policies that you all have put up to deter crime, do they truly reflect the values of the community? And we've got to start having some really tough conversations about this. How do we approach it? I was speaking to a cop earlier today, and he said, you know, when I come out and I'm in the neighborhood, he said, people know who I am, but I also understand that you got to give love in order to receive love. And I think that that's an approach. And I told him, I said, you're very unique. And I said, I'm grateful that we have men like you on the police force. But the reality is we need more. We need somebody who has the heart for these young men, that loves them in the community. And we've also got to ask that tough question of how much does white supremacy play in this role of how these things end? I mean, what you saw with Ahmaud Arbery was vicious. You know, what you saw with Rayshard Brooks was vicious. He was shot in the back 3 times, and then he was kicked in the head. You know, and one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to speak to a lot of police officers and get their point. And they said, you know what? We were with that officer up until we saw him kick the guy in the head as he bled out. He said, that's not protocol. Protocol is rendering aid after you shot him. And so these are my questions. So if we understand, right, if we understand that this isn't part of protocol, like, how do we start to address these issues and we start to fix them? How do we fix these cover-ups? And that's one of the things that I'm proud in terms of the work that we're able to do with shining light on this, because when you start to look at the history of corruption and you start to put these facts before our politicians, and in the heat of the climate that's going on right now, it is forcing them to take action. And I think we need to continue to apply that pressure so that we can get to a point to where when we say Black Lives Matter, people really understand it. Wow, they are crying out for help. Folks are scared instead of replying, all lives matter.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, you know, I remember being young and the cops actually were out in the neighborhood walking around, right? They were talking to us. They were going to the store. They would play ball with us, right? They were there. I remember them being an integral part of the community. And so whenever there was a dispute, guns did not immediately come out, right? As a matter of fact, most of the time, they knew the person by name who was having the dispute, and they could almost talk to them as if they were their father or their uncle, right? And right now, that's exactly what you don't have. You don't have cops that understand the needs of the community that they are policing, because they don't even know the people that they are policing, which then if you don't know the people that you're policing, guess what? They're no longer people, right? And hence, that's where we get into the issue, is that we are not always seen as human, right? And to your point about protocol, I always ask myself that question, well, what is the protocol? Because if cops think that they can get away, right, with putting a knee to my neck for 9 minutes on tape, and they actually think they're going to get away with it, I'm trying to figure out, well, where did they get that idea from? What's going on in some of these secret meetings, right, with how we are to be treated, that is letting you believe or allowing you to believe that you can actually take my Black body from me and then go back home and eat Whataburger for 3 months. Whataburger is a Texas thing if you don't know. But you can go home and you literally can eat burgers and fries while my family is burying me and fighting for justice. What are these conversations that are happening, right? Because what we have right now, we have the one bad apple syndrome. It's always just that one bad apple, right? It's that one bad cop. And after you've seen this happen over and over again, you realize that it's not the one bad anything. It's actually a bad system.
Yeah.
And it's a system that has to be changed.
Yeah.
Right. Now it's interesting because both of you are sort of dealing with sort of rewriting this sort of negative narrative in many ways of Black men, because in many ways, John, what you're doing is you're training young Black men, right? You're actually giving them the tools, you're equipping them to go out into the world, to get jobs, to get into college, right? You're really sort of rewriting a sort of a negative narrative. And then the same thing with you, Dante, in many ways, after these men are killed, you're literally going in and rewriting the story that the media has put out. And in terms of being activists, do you both see yourself as activists? And then how do you now take that activism to the people that you serve?
Yeah, hands down, I see myself as activist. I think most Black men are activists before they're anything else because they're Black, and there's a constant fight for their humanity. And for me, God has given me these talents. He's allowed me to take what I've learned in various media forms. He's allowed me to take the experience that I've learned in the DA's office, the understanding of law, how it's applied, and he's given me this unique opportunity to bring our voices back to the table. And I think that's extremely impactful. And that's what I'm passionate about is really understanding. It's so crazy because I've been to a majority of these peaceful protests.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see the young men come up and say, you know what, you don't have to be here, and the fact that you're out here with us says a lot. But my whole point to them is I don't see myself any different. I've heard my entire career, Dante, you're different. Dante, you're different. When I look in the eyes of Ahmaud Arbery, I don't see anybody different. When I look into the, going all the way back to Emmett Till and Jimmy Lee Jackson, I see Dante Carter. I don't see a difference when I look into the eyes of these men. When I looked into the eyes of Trayvon Martin, I didn't see anybody different. And so I don't look at this as this is a career where I'm making money. I look at this as a career where, you know what? I'm fighting for my daughter's life. I'm fighting for my nephew's lives. I'm fighting for my niece's lives. I'm fighting for my cousin's lives. And I'm fighting to let the world know that, you know what, whether or not y'all are ready to have this conversation, I'm kicking in the door and I'm letting you know that Black Lives Matter. And I'm going to fight to make sure that we breathe again.
Yeah. I definitely just want to echo what Dante said. I mean, and from an activist role, every day I get an opportunity to role model what a man is, a Black man is in this country. Get a chance to role model what a father is. Have two beautiful daughters. And we get an opportunity as an organization to take that back and share it with over 125,000 youth around the world. And again, as I go back to our motto, what they see is what they'll be, we take that to heart 100%. And we also have another model, real men given real time. And while it may not always be the perfect time, or you're not always the perfect mentor, and we're not looking for any of those, we're just looking for somebody that's going to be consistent with these kids and be 100% honest with them, because we have a real platform to touch the lives of these young people. And as I think about my past and my history, only through the grace of God, and also it was somebody else reaching a hand back to pull me up. So yeah, activist all the time.
All right, brothers, I want to thank both of y'all. Keep doing what you're doing. This work is so important because ultimately, to your point, Dante, I think, and as you said, before Black men are anything, they're activists. And so I appreciate the work that you all are doing because you are empowering the communities. And so, brothers, just keep doing, keep speaking, and let's just keep edifying each other. I appreciate y'all being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us.
Of course. Muted. Hey, everybody, welcome back to this dynamic conversation about the intersection of social justice, art, and media. I'm now joined with some of the most brilliant and creative minds working on the front lines right now. And I want to introduce them so we can jump right in. First, I'm joined by Mr. Joshua Kissy. How you doing, brother?
Good. How are you doing, brother?
I'm great. And Joshua Kissy is a Ghanaian-American creative entrepreneur specializing in photography and creative direction based in New York City. He is also one of the co-founders of Tonal, a culturally diverse stock imagery company aiming to change the narrative and current aesthetics of stock photography. Through Tonal, Kissy seeks to improve the landscape of stock imagery content by widening representation with storytelling as a critical element. Kissy is the co-creator of Grace, Love in 3 Acts, an anthology series scheduled to premiere on A Space for Creators. We appreciate you being here with us tonight, brother.
Oh, wow. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And also we are joined by Mr. E. Mackey. How you doing, brother?
What's going on, everybody? I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good, man. E. Mackey is a photographer, director, and cinematographer who is currently covering the Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd protests. He has spent the past 6 weeks traveling between Brunswick, Georgia, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, capturing powerful moments of activists and protesters fighting for change. In addition to his work as a photographer covering the protests, E. Mackey has created branded multicultural content for an array of top brands, including Toyota and Twitter. I am honored to be here with both of you brothers tonight. All right, I'm gonna jump right in here. So Frederick Douglass was once the most photographed man in the world, right? And he said that the moral and social influence of pictures was more important in shaping national culture than the making of its laws. Even then, right, Frederick Douglass understood the power of the image in rewriting and ultimately correcting the negative and evil image that America and the world, for that matter, had, and I would actually still argue still has, of Black people. And my question is, how are you using images right now to continue the work that Brother Frederick Douglass began well over a century ago?
You want to take that one first?
I was like, yeah, either one. I feel like yours.
I feel like I'll talk too much.
No. I'll give the short answer and I'll let you give the long answer then.
Okay.
All right.
No, I think an image works as a reference point in history, and I think Frederick Douglass was an overseer in understanding that. So as much as you look as an image, it's almost like a page in a history book. So it shows you who was there, why they were there, their mode, their mood, and there's so much that could be grasped from that. And I think for Black people, we've been locked away from partaking in image making. So we've only been the subjects, and when we're not at the kind of the center of our own narratives, things become skewed, and a lot of wrong telling comes to the surface. So I think Frederick Douglass understood that even if you didn't know how to read, you kind of knew how to understand an image when you saw it. And of course, a lot of people's literacy rates was also very low at the time. So I think he was kind of trying to, predict the future and say like images will always be important. And here we are today, where from images to film to social media, it's a very large part of today's protests. But as well as the witness, right? To act as a witness is kind of the very form of kind of activism, and if I could call it creative activism, that we see today.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. From my perspective, I think what I wanted to do was just provide like accurate documentation. You know what I mean? I realized the power of the media to kind of shape the narrative, And so I felt like if I went out there, I can go and I could really shoot it as it is and then allow people to kind of draw their own interpretations from what was shot, if that makes sense. So I guess to answer the question, what I'm doing is I'm just going out to try to make sure that I give the most accurate depiction as possible. And like a lot of times when I post my imagery, I'll put like a blurb of what was actually going on to kind of give you some context, because sometimes images could be misinterpreted. And I'll give you an example. I saw a video of police officers breaking the window out of like a bank or something like that a couple weeks ago, somewhere in LA. And the video starts at a point where the police are breaking the window out. And so people are saying, oh, see, the police are breaking and destroying and they're doing all this and that. And so people were sending it to me to repost. And I'm like, I'm not reposting that because I don't have the full context, because what it could possibly have been was that the window was already broken and they're just clearing the glass out of the way to make it safe for them to enter. So I think that, going out and capturing this imagery and kind of giving like a small story of like what actually was happening, and then allowing people to kind of interpret on their own, kind of helps us to paint our own pictures and tell our own stories, as opposed to it being shifted and skewed,
Got you. And real quick, before we keep going, I want to introduce another brother who's going to join us right now, Mr. Gino Brooks. Where you at, Gino? There he is. How you doing, brother?
Man. I'm great, man. Good to see you, good brothers.
What up, Gino? How's it going?
I'm all right. How you doing?
We good, man. I'm going to read you real quick. So Gino Brooks is a filmmaker behind the award-winning web series, The Therapist. He is one of the co-creators behind You, Me, Us, and Black Boots, 2 web series currently streaming on the Space for Creators. He is also proactively designing a creative arts program, which will provide the educational foundation so children can explore the art of writing scripts, shooting short movies, editing, and also showing them how to market their own films as well. Prior to becoming a filmmaker, Brooks spent 10 years working in social services in underserved communities in Los Angeles. Welcome, brother. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, man. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. How y'all doing?
Man. We good, man. I want to sort of continue this discussion that we started, and I'm curious to know, and obviously we're now, talking about Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, but we can all, go back to Tamir Rice and even further back to an Emmett Till. And I'm curious to know, when you think about this continuum of violence, right, that has in many ways been waged on Black people, how has that influenced the work that you make, right? How has that inspired the types of work that you feel like you want to put out into the world?
Great question, by the way. I think for me, what I just started realizing more recently than before is that a lot of the things start on page, right? And I can only do what I can do with the power that I have, and that's my creative vessel, the imagery, the characters, the stories that I like to tell. I can only, at this point, really truly impact the way our narrative is being put out there, right? For a quick example, if a police officer or a racist person sits in front of a TV, which is what I call a programming box, right? And our images, the stories that they're seeing are so many negative things that's being portrayed out there. What doesn't allow me to think that that's also programming them to not think about us value, right? With the value that we actually have, because we're really pushing that or allowing those narratives to continue. So what I mean is, what I'm trying to do now in changing is to just in control those for, make sure I'm a part of telling those stories and making sure that, we don't tap out as being as nurses. We can be doctors, you know what I mean? All these stories doesn't necessarily have to be we have to be thugs. And a lot of us as creators, we continue to push this narrative because that's what we know. That's what you hear. Well, that's what I know. I tell that story. Yeah. Not saying to steer away from that. I'm just saying, just realize what you're also doing to that. And I'll bring it back to the white man. So the police officer, these white people, that's racist, see these images, right? And if we have a piece of controlling that, then the more they intake that shit, can I curse? I'm sorry.
You already did it, so we good.
So my bad. The more the more we intake that stuff, man, is the more, you know what I'm saying, that stuff is out there, and you don't really subconsciously, you don't know you're putting out there, and you might feel somebody think it's okay to do something. So to bring it all back, I just want to say, man, it's changed me because, realizing the power that we have, is to try to change that narrative, man, on how we're portrayed on screen, right, in storytelling. And for me, it starts on the page.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to answer that?
Well,
I think I'm sorry. No,
no,
you're
no,
good.
go ahead.
That's it.
Go ahead.
Even when we're discussing some of the, when you brought up the Frederick Douglass quote about, it made me think around maybe not the intention behind creating a camera, but what it's been used as. And I remember reading literature very early on talking about the camera was just as pivotal and impactful for like colonialization and seeing something that you wanted to take over or ravage or pillage through villages as was the gun. So a lot of the language is synonymous, right? There's shooting, there's capturing, there's documenting, there's taking. Like there's all this language that doesn't necessarily sound like you see people as an equal. So even the language we use within our photography or with our videography or filmmaking has a very like toxic background and context. And so it's like, how do we decolonize the camera when now we're taking these tools back, but we're bringing back a truthful image. So it's not enough to just be a historian. How could you be an archivist? How could you put out truthful stories that people will be able to be inspired by? And the notion is that, if you're my subject, that means I own you, right? Or there's some ownership over your narrative, right? And I think now as Black creators, we're kind of taking that ownership back and kind of nourishing, the communities that have inspired us throughout the generations, instead of giving them what they would normally see, whether it's like Nat Geo photographers and very early photography where they just show people in a certain light and be like, this is the reason why we need to invade this place, because these people are living like this, and they otherize everybody else. So I think white visuality has become a norm, and we're trying to undo that through the work we're doing collectively.
It's interesting, man, because you use the term that I absolutely love, decolonizing our camera, right? And I'm curious from all of you, like, do you think that means that we have to sanitize who we are, right? Because oftentimes we hear this notion that we all have to sort of look a certain way, right? Versus one of my favorite films is Boys in the Hood, which I absolutely love. Yeah. And I love that movie, one, because I was growing up in the hood during that time and sort of living through that circumstance, but also for me, even though it was showing a quote unquote negative image, right? What it really was doing was rewriting that negative image. It was almost using the image that white people had used to wage war against us to disarm them and to actually offer us back our humanity. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know that when you go in and you start creating, you start thinking about this whole notion of decolonizing the camera, do we have to sort of portray ourselves in one way, or can we continue to run the gamut?
No. You don't compromise. No, you're an artist. The whole purpose of being an artist is to make somebody feel something, to make somebody think something, to challenge somebody's beliefs. So no, at least me, I'm not compromising my art for anybody. I'm gonna make what I want to make. And the thing about making what I want to make is going back to what you just said about Boys in the Hood. It goes back to what I was saying about the police. What Boys in the Hood did was add context. It gave nuance. Yeah. It's like it's Black people in the hood, but it's Black people in the hood that's trying to go to college. It's Black people in the hood that's trying to get out of the hood. And then they have all these negative things, whether it be systemic or what, that are challenges to them trying to, to ascend out of the hood. So, I mean, no, I don't think that we compromise at all. I think that there are measures that we can take to stop the negative portrayal, you know what I mean? Because we can be overtly like heavy-handed on that side, but overall, no, give more context. There's plenty of things about our culture that people at large don't know about. You know what I mean? Like, we all know what time it is when we go to a cookout and a deck of cards come out. We already know what time it is. You know what I'm saying? Not everybody knows. Not everybody would get that reference, but why not? You know what I mean? So I don't think that we have to doctor it up or pretty it up or wash it down at all. No, just tell our true, authentic story. Tell the real story.
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
I mean, I agree. But I'll take that same example and I'll say, what I'm trying to push here now about controlling and sure it's changing the Black man. If you can still have that plight of the Black man against all of the things that we go through, right? In a way that Boys in the Hood, right? Just supporting what you're saying, but having a different focus on it is, yes, all the fighting, all the shooting, all the things that he went out, and there's a positive message in that film. one being the father, right? Not many films before that showed us in the light, showed single fathers like that. So it's a way to kind of do both. And I think that's the balance that you're speaking to. And so yeah, I support what he's saying, and but also making sure we highlight the things within that we also need to bump up and make sure that we do a better job of.
All right. And now I want to ask specific questions to each of you all really quickly. Now, E. Mackey, you've been on the front lines of these protests for a while, and I'm curious to know what drew you to that? What made you say, you know what, I got to get out there and I have to really document what's happening in the streets right now?
Honestly, I just got tired of crying for people I ain't know. Like, I was coming home from Walmart or somewhere, and you know, sometimes you park your car and then you just sit in the car, you don't get out. It was one of those situations, and I was watching the video of his murder, and I just broke down and I cried, you know. And when I sat in the car probably like 30 minutes, just emotional, and I came out, I made a video, like some type of video that I posted. And from that moment, I was like, you know what? I need to do something. You know what I mean? I got tired of feeling like I was a slave watching a master rape my wife, because that's what it felt like. Like, we see these videos, we get upset, we get angry, and we're like, it's nothing we can do. And so I thought to myself, like, well, it's nothing that I can do immediately to change a law. It's nothing that I can do immediately to change whatever's going on. So then I started thinking, what power do I have? And then I realized that I can create, you know? And so I thought to myself, you know, I might not be the person that throws a brick through the window. I might not be the person that sets the building on fire, but I'm the person that's going to cement it in history and make sure that everybody else sees it. And so I realized that was my power. You know, that was where I could make a difference, and where I could make a difference around the world because of the internet. So that's really what inspired me, was I just felt like I had to do something. And when I thought about the resources that I had, this was the strongest, most powerful one that I could think of.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I think oftentimes when we hear the word activist, we immediately think that we have to be on the front lines marching, that we have to be out there, you know what I mean, in the middle of protests. And that's not always the case, right? There are different ways to be activists, right? And that sort of leads me to my question to you, Josh. You know, as a creator, you know, you're always online and you're Googling stock images, right? And you're trying to find, let me get an image of a black man swimming. You can't find it. Let me get it, right? And you've created a platform where now I literally can go on Tonal and find these images of beautiful black people doing everyday things. What inspired you to create that?
That's a great question. I think, I mean, sadly enough, three years ago, when Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were murdered by the police, myself and my partner, Karen Okonkwo, we came up with Tonal. And similar to E. Mackey, we feel really, you know, just kind of destabilized. You almost feel powerless. You feel angry. You feel all these moments. And I was just like, what can I do as a creative, as a storyteller, as a photographer? So Karen approached me with this idea, and I was like, let's do it. Because what they don't see is us in our everyday moments, us in the nuance and the depth of us, right? So there's only peak moments. They see the extremes of who we are, right? But they don't really get to see the nuance and the beauty of who we are. So I knew that photography was very, very pivotal in how we saw imagery. So stock photos was very important when you think about press, media, journalism, textbooks, like all of this. Like, you could really go back to the textbooks we grew up with, look through pages and just see the kind of remnants of like racism, remnants of white supremacy, just based on the storytelling, based on the image. And I was like, if anything I could do as a photographer collectively is bring other photographers together and think around, how do we inform the world of how we look rather than how they think we look. And Tonal for 3 years has been amazing, because companies are less like, okay, on the lowest hanging fruit possible, this is something you could subscribe to. So companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google's all use the platform because they understand that, like, hey, if our internal materials don't have this diversity of blackness, like there's so many different types of black people at that. So it's like, if you're not representing all people, how can you really say this product is for all people? How can you really sell something, whether it's a story or the benefit of it, if you're not including people who are at the forefront of it? So I think for the most part, tonal is something that has grown to be something just beyond me as a photographer. And that's how I was thinking, like, okay, how do I could go out, I could shoot, but as well as like, how do we create institutions that are for us, right? Like, and that's what we don't have most times. When it comes to platforms like this, like I1, it's like, okay, this is for us, by us. And like, that's how we could be able to give out unfiltered stories. But most times, like, you go into different spaces and you can't necessarily be your full self. And you kind of have to kind of manage to kind of exist within with their expression of who they think we are, right? So I just think we need more Black wealth institutions, and not that Black wealth or capitalism will solve all of our issues. It won't, and we've seen it time and time again, but at least it'll give us more platforms to make the right decisions. Like, just to have the ability to fail, right? Just to have the privilege to have an option is like what we're asking for, right? When it comes to equality.
You know, it's interesting because I'm gonna throw back to your term, what I love, which is decolonizing, right? And I think what you're doing in many ways is you're decolonizing the media, because in many ways they will always say, and the same thing with you, E. Mackey, when you think about these protests, there's always that negative portrayal, right?
Yeah.
But it takes us being on the ground, being witnesses to what's happening, to actually begin to rewrite the narrative. And that's what both of you are doing with your work. And that leads me over to you, Gino. You created the artistic standard, right, to sort of amplify Black voices. And I'm curious to know, in the midst of all of the recent protests, how are you using that initiative now?
It's a great thing, because when I see, I just got familiar with E. Mackey's his work, because he was working with one of my sisters that was in my material, KJ Smith, and she was in my first web series, and it's like my sister. So anyhow, like Joshua was saying, 4 years ago or 3 years ago, when Alton Sterling and Philando Castile passed away, I was doing some version of what E. Mackey is doing. I just couldn't travel, right? A lot of photos that you may have seen, I was on the front line here in Hollywood, but I couldn't do that this time. It was a pandemic. Now I have kids, and I just couldn't get out and be as active. So I applaud you, brothers, for doing that. So what I started to do, I was like, you know what? I have this platform, a part of Hollywood and growing the business is having the opportunity to truly break through. So what I started to do was like, man, you know what? I got a lot of young up and coming writers that I can lend my platform to, right? Then give them to a chance to grow voices. With that, go back to, just making sure that they understand that you have the power to start off where we want to go, as far as how they see us in imageries, in our images, in our storytelling. So we implemented a mentee program. We learned how to write, shoot films, take them out and produce them. Kids all the way from as young as 10 to young adults. So we just implemented that, and we just got sponsored by our Final Draft, which is the industry standard for storytelling. So we're on our way. We just launched it about a month ago, but at the height and when everything started really going, so we just launched it then. So
no, I mean that it's amazing work. I mean, I think as artists, we also have to be teachers, right? Because ultimately we have to pass these tools down to the next generation, because they then will have to become the witnesses after we're gone. And so I think the work that you're doing is amazing, because you're basically training the next generation to do the work that all of you brothers are on here doing. And you mentioned a sister whose name I just forgot that quickly, but the one thing I want to ask all of you brothers, Black women have been at the forefront of every movement, right? I'm thinking about the Black Panthers, right? I'm thinking about even Rosa Parks, not even the Rosa Parks who gets arrested on the bus, but the Rosa Parks who was going through the South documenting rape cases of Black women and trying to find justice for them, right? Black women have always been at the forefront, and oftentimes we forget that, right? For some reason, those women are pushed to the side. What can we do, right, as Black men, Black creatives, to make sure that we are championing our Black sisters, so that the work that they are doing is one, not discarded, but also so that they get the credit for that work.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you asked this, because like, since I've been traveling, this has been something that's been super important to me. And I'm gonna try to say this real quick. I actually just made a status about this today, like a couple hours ago. But when I originally went out to Minneapolis, I wanted to go out for 2 days. I looked at my bills. I was like, I can afford to go out for 2 days, and I'm back. By the time I got there, so many people had started asking for my Cash App to send me donations and like to try to help me, that by the second night when I was about to check out, I had enough money to stay. A Black woman hit me up. I didn't know her. She was like, hey, I just want to know, could I get you a hotel? And I'm like, yeah,
Wow.
no, can you get it for the next few days? And now I knew I had enough money to stay. Well, it went from me going out for 2 days, and I've been on this road for a month. Like, George Floyd got killed on a Monday, I think it was. I was in Minneapolis on Wednesday, and I've been all over the country because so many people came together to donate and pray for me and do all of this type of stuff. And so when I look back at it, it was primarily Black women. And so I thought about the fact that all these Black women that did not know me covered me. It was people telling me they praying for me. They're worried about me. I'm doing lives. They're like, oh my gosh, be careful. And I'm like, dang, we don't show them any love. Like, we don't protect them like that. And so being out there on the front lines, you see nothing but women. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, it made me realize that something important that I like to do, that I've started doing, is anytime I'm in the presence of a Black woman and I can speak to her one-on-one, I always try to pour something into her. I tell her, look, you are loved. You are beautiful. You have a purpose. Your purpose is important. Please continue doing what you're doing because we need you. You know what I mean? And I try to pour into a Black woman. So I think that's something that we can do. You'd be surprised how just giving that one message will touch them, because it's like they're not accustomed to a random man just coming up and saying you're appreciated. I'm not trying to holler at you. I'm not trying to compliment your physical looks or anything like that. I want to speak to the core of who you are and let you know that I see you and I love you and I appreciate you. And I think that that's one thing that we can do right now, is just talk to them. Just tell them we appreciate them.
No, this is true. Yeah, I feel like, and I tweeted this the other day. I was just saying how, like, I feel like all the major parts of growth for me came through a Black woman, whether it was my mom, my wife, my sisters. So there's just so much gratitude and just thankfulness when it comes to them. And Emaki's right. We got to show that more than we are doing now, but as well as amplify their voices without our filter or view, where it's like, hey, like, your voice coming to the forefront is important. Not because of my view of what I think it should be. It should be what you think it is. And I think Black women, honestly, for me, like, run the world. They run the internet. They start the trends. They communicate. They spread information like no one else. I'm just so inspired by them, and I want to show that more. And even within my career, there was always a Black woman on the other side of the desk, whether it was a client or worked at a company. I was just like, hey, let me put you on game. I know you did this, but let me show you this. Like, they're just natural nurturers when it comes to Black men. And now we just have that due diligence and respect to continue to uplift them, continue to uplift their stories. Don't question them. Don't silence them. And that hashtag, listen to Black women and protect Black women, is very much a thing. We're seeing it in our media. We're seeing it within the industry of how we treat women, and particularly Black women at Black-run institutions, who are silenced or gaslit or not believed or made to feel like they're incompetent. I feel like that needs to stop, where now it's just like, hey, like, if a Black woman raised you, you should know better than to treat another person like that, who you, yes, aren't attracted to or anything. Just treat every Black woman with the same amount of respect, like, no matter what.
I agree, man. And to your point, I do think Black women rule the world, you know, because ultimately all of us came from Black women. And we oftentimes, growing up, oftentimes forget that when we deal with Black women. And it's important not only that we respect them, but as you said, we amplify their voices and we give them, right, the opportunity to tell their own stories. You know, I even think about the Black Lives Matter movement. I think a lot of people don't know 3 Black women started that, right? We forget that for some reason, right? And I think it's important, again, that those women really are thrust into the public eye, so that they can not only get the due diligence that they need, but also so that they can just be celebrated, and also so they can just continue to do the strategizing that they have been doing behind the scenes. Because ultimately, again, Black women have always been, in my opinion, the sort of unsung architects of a lot of our movements. And brothers, we got to go now. They're telling me that we got to move on. Keep doing what y'all doing. It was a pleasure and honor to talk to y'all. Keep being on the front lines, telling our stories. We need you. We need each other. Let's show each other brotherly love. And y'all just keep doing what y'all doing, man.
All right. All right.
All right.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yep.
Hey, brothers. How y'all doing?
That was a powerful conversation, man. Panel 1 and panel 2. That was amazing, man.
Appreciate it. It was amazing, man. Those some amazing brothers doing some much needed work in the community, in the artistic field, and so we need all of that.
Definitely.
And you know, it's interesting because I'm thinking about the 100 Black Men motto. You know, what they see is what they'll be. And I think for all of us, that's something that we really, really need to think about is the images that we put out, because ultimately we are creating the world that we want to live in. And so we have to really, really be mindful of what it is that we're showing our young people, and also the images that we're putting out of others who may not even be like us.
That's true. That's the perfect segue to part 3 of our discussion, because I got 2 brothers that are part of the Emerging 100. And they're ready to talk about some of the things that they're doing on the ground level to empower the youth.
Y'all do y'all thing, man. I appreciate you having me on here. 100 Black Men, Space for Creators. Y'all keep doing y'all thing.
Thanks for everything, brother Yaqui.
All right.
So this is the third segment of our panel discussion. I have 2 very distinguished gentlemen with me right now. I have Brother Carlos Scott, who is the treasurer for Emerging 100, South Metro Atlanta chapter, president of the Emerging 100, Brother Christopher Jones. How you guys doing today?
All right. Doing good.
Now, many of the conversations that we had earlier, they dealt with the imagery of Black and brown people. Just tell me how the protests and the recent cases of injustices impacted you as a Black man in America personally.
I'll kick it off. This time I feel like a lot of it has happened so many times that a part of me started to feel like somewhat desensitized. But it's been, I have a renewed sense of hope, seeing that some people are starting to wake up. There's like a new energy about what's happening in 2020 during this pandemic. So I don't know if it's taking us to kind of be still and to really just now pay attention, but I feel like this is different.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments. You know, it's a lot to digest right now, just due to the fact that, like Chris said, there was some sort of numbness that you kind of started to experience, just dating back as far as, you know, the Trayvon Martin killings and the Eric Gardners. And if you ask some of our elders, I'm sure they'll tell you that numbness goes back even further, decades even. But just as of recently, I think we all became a little desensitized to it because it became such a regular occurrence within our nation. But something about this most recent string of killings, unwarranted killings, has it seems to have struck a nerve across not just the nation but across the globe. And as much as it's pained me to my spirit to process the loss that these families and that these individuals have undergone, it's been very, very uplifting to see the amount of collaboration and unity that's been created from this, as opposed to in past times where it kind of felt like you could look across the crowd and you were going to see one complexion. I think that it's very, very nice to see that we have allies from white, yellow, brown backgrounds as well, that all feel that there's a need for us to have a swinging the pendulum for change right now.
Love that. Now, a big part of any movement is our community organizations that are down on the ground, on the grassroots level, that are really doing the work day in and day out. Both of you are a part of the Emerging 100. You can start off, Carlos. Just tell us a little bit about some of the things that Emerging is doing in the community in Atlanta, and some of the programs that you guys are running as well to empower Black youth.
Okay. Well, the chapter that I'm a part of is the Emerging 100 of South Metro Atlanta. We're an auxiliary chapter for the 100 Black Men of South Metro Atlanta. And we serve as an arm of the chapter to kind of serve as a gateway for those who are kind of in the 35 to 25-year-old demographic. And in conjunction with the Emerging 100, the 100 Black Men serves the South Metro community via mentoring, which is our primary focus. We mentor students, high school aged males, and provide them with the tools and resources they need and a space for them to actually have those difficult conversations and to also learn the tools and life skills that are needed to thrive as young Black men within our society. Outside of our mentorship, we also have a slew of different other programs that support our pillars. I'm over the Economic Empowerment and Finance Committee. So one of my objectives and goals is to ensure that we provide our community with resources to financially empower themselves and to make economically sound decisions with their finances, and so that we can kind of control more of our surroundings by our spend. But outside of that, we do other initiatives such as we have a fitness initiative in which we do working out on 100 with different fitness providers and trainers, as well as we have some voting and census initiatives that we're currently working with other organizations on. But we're really just a community arm. We live to serve the communities in which we all reside in, and whatever the occasion is, be it a holiday or be it an injustice, we always will be on the forefront of serving.
And Chris, can you take a deeper dive into the mentorship program? I know about Rites of Passage and some other programs that you guys are involved in. Just talk about the importance of mentoring Black youth and the way that plays in the movement overall of just empowering our communities.
Definitely. As you mentioned, mentoring is kind of the cornerstone of what we do. And we have a signature mentorship program that works with 9th through 12th graders. And normally, if COVID-19 was not the case, they would be at our office every Saturday, and where they will learn life skills, college preparatory skills, as well as we're just there to be a support, so that they can talk to someone about what's going on in their lives. Just a few weeks ago, since COVID-19 has struck, we have transitioned from in-person mentoring to online mentoring. So we had a Zoom meeting. There were about almost 30 to 40 of us on the call, and I was just blown away to hear some of the thoughts and comments that these young men had. They are a lot more mature and cognizant of what is going on than a lot of us give them credit for. And it's an honor to be able to sometimes people just need a voice to listen to. And I feel that is one aspect that we as mentors are able to do. I know that you don't always have an example of what you want to be. Sometimes you just need someone to bounce an idea off of. And so kind of going back to what they see is what they'll be is what we can do, and to be a resource.
Love that. Now, you guys mentioned earlier that you guys are doing some initiatives that are around the census and voting as well. So we could kind of transition a little bit and talk about the correlation between voting, the census, and combining those two pillars to be able to dismantle systematic oppression. Share with our viewers some of the things that you guys are currently working on now to, number one, increase voter registration so people are going to the polls, primarily youth, and educating people more about the importance of completing the census.
Yeah, I'll take that, Will. I think that our current initiatives that we've been putting forth, even since late last year, have kind of all been centered around four pillars, if you will. Mobilizing, educating, motivating, and eradicating is what I would like to refer to them as. And by that, we intend to mobilize a lot of those populations, especially the younger demographic. We all know that the Black male vote is amongst the lowest of the demographics that vote. So we do things to try and help reach that target demographic, to also mobilize them, to empower them of the different vehicles they have to voice their vote. Whether that be early voting, whether that be mail-in voting, or actually voting on the day of. We want to try and make sure that they have a full knowledge of the different arrays of opportunities they have to vote. Beyond that, we have the educational component, in which we feel is vital for not just those who are not necessarily in the standard demographic that votes, but for those that are consistent voters and that pride themselves on being politically inclined, like myself and some of my peers, who just may not have a resource to get the actual records of those people who are asking for our support, that wants to represent us. So we think that educating the masses on the records of those who want to represent us and the bills and laws that are put forth on how those things may impact their local community and impact them individually is a key proponent, as well as motivating the masses to get out. And I think one thing that this recent change in events has brought is a different fire, a different fervor of a motivation for a lot of us right now. And I think that it's best that we take that energy and continue to roll on into our polls and let that fervor be felt. And I think that the motivation amongst the things that we always see in the news and the politicians that, sway us to want to get out and become more active to remove them. I think as much as we focus on what needs to be changed and removed from our political landscape, we also have to educate people and motivate them on what they can do to help be a part of that change. So that we're not just casting a ballot and expecting the next person to rid us of all of our internal and our community issues. So I think that motivating is a very strong, vital proponent of it. And lastly, I would say eradicate the stigmas that we've put out against voting and against the census that our community has been, kind of spoon-fed. And in some ways, we fan our own flames of distrust, of disbelief, and the government and some systems. And I think that we have to eradicate the stigma that Black men do not care about the political landscape and that they don't feel that their voices are worth being heard. And then we also need to focus on making sure that we eradicate our own perception of the process and the benefits of the process, so that not only once you cast your vote, but you know how to hold those who have received your vote accountable, so that when the time comes, if they have not served up to the status quo or met the expectations that you and the community have set for them, you can hold them accountable and remove them from office until you find the right candidate or candidates to serve your community.
Love that. Love that. Now, just taking a deeper dive into the narratives and the stigmas that are associated with voting, the census, or just Black men in general. Chris, this is a question for you. Is there anything that you guys do to try to break some of those monolithic narratives that are associated with voting, the census, or just the image of Black men and women?
Yes, and that has kind of been one of the motivators behind our strategy and our activities that go along with voting and the census. This past month, we executed 2 virtual events centered around the census and the vote, where we had panelists from different walks of life, representing different organizations, to kind of come on and break it down for the average viewer as to why it's so important. One of our panelists was our 100 Black Men mentor, Brian Jones, and he mentioned about people don't realize what the census data is used for. So many times we think about, oh, I really wish this restaurant or this store would come into my neighborhood, but not realizing, well, if I want that developer to know that I'm here and that I would patronize their restaurant, I need to fill out the census data so that they'll know that if I'm going to put a business there, then I'll actually make some money. It also affects how districts are aligned, the money that goes into our schools. So it seemed like a really easy thing to blow off, but it really affects our day-to-day, and it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah, and I'll add to that really briefly that even with voting, I think a lot of people sometimes resort to the old stigmas of, I don't want to be on jury duty, or, a lot of these things are cyclical situations in which we want to ensure justice is served when it has been so frequently misserved to our community. But we oftentimes decline the opportunity to have a seat in that jury panel, or to be amongst those peers that can actually find those people who have done us wrong or served us in insufficient capacities guilty of such actions. So I think that we have to, draw the full picture out for a lot of those who are not registered voters and not, want to participate, because a lot of the things that we're looking to change and sway are done by just becoming a voter and taking advantage of the rights that so many fought for us to have.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I read that in 2010, the 2010 census, I believe 3.9 million Black people weren't counted. So that's a lot of funding that could have been put in the Black community that just went absent just because people, they either weren't informed or the narrative around filling out the census was not strong enough and did not resonate with them. So I love that you guys are in the community on the ground, raising awareness around the importance of the census in addition to voting as well, because just like you guys said, that plays a critical role into electing the officials that have the back of Black and brown people. Before we get out of here, any advice? This is a question for both of you. Any advice for young Black professionals or even teenagers that aspire to follow in your footsteps, or that aspire to be activists or community organizers or community leaders, or people that just aspire to make an impact within their community?
I would say to start, ask questions, find out who is doing what you want to do, and speak up. One of my good friends, Joey Womack, often says, we already have everything we need. We're just highly inefficient in how we deploy those resources. We don't always have to start a new nonprofit or business. Sometimes we need to support those organizations that are already doing the work and support them so that they can do things better. So just speak up and see where you can be of service. And I believe that you will find yourself in doing that service to benefit your community.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Chris. And I think the biggest thing to do is to show that we all can play a part in this change. We all come from different walks of lives, different ages, demographics, so forth. And I think the biggest thing is showing that it doesn't require you to be on the front line, so to speak, every day in order for your impact to be felt. I think there's a litany of ways in which we can go about contributing, whether it be how we watch our financial spend and make sure that our dollars only go to those who are deserving and who are supporting our causes. I think that if we empower ourselves to watch our participation in certain things, whether that be viewership of programming or whether that be participation in sporting events and so forth and so on, that we could really see the impact of our participation without necessarily feeling as if you have to challenge yourself and take on the burden of the movement as a full-time thing. I think our day-to-day lives could be just a part of the fabric of our spin and the fabric of how we go about doing things, supporting one another, could impact it. So for those that are looking from the ground up, I think that if you just start to slowly incorporate the way you live into the things that align with what the movement is currently presenting, it'll kind of give you a path forward. And as you get more confident in your own skill set and resources, you'll find the organizations or the niche in which your talents are required for, and then just roll your sleeves up and get involved. It's not going to happen one brick at a time. It's going to happen one brick at a time. It's not just going to be built overnight, but we all play a part in casting those bricks onto the foundation of what we're trying to build here. So I just encourage everyone to not be dissuaded by the challenge ahead of us, but just play your part, no matter how small or how big it all, ultimately manifests itself in what we're trying to do.
Love that. Love that. Before I let you brothers go, for everyone that may not be familiar with 100 Black Men or the Emerging 100, where can they go to find more information about those organizations?
Sure. So 100 Black Men nationally is 100blackmen.org. And our chapter, 100 Black Men of South Metro Atlanta and Emerging 100 of South Metro Atlanta, you can find out more information at 100southmetro.org.
Love that. Love that, man. Thank you, brothers. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this powerful discussion this evening. This is going to be one of many conversations that I'm sure that are going to be taking place throughout the summer. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thank you for the work that you're doing in the community on the grassroots level, because it's definitely needed. And many times organizations like the Emerging 100 or 100 Black Men don't get the credit they deserve because they're behind the scenes doing the work each and every day. So thank you, brothers, for all your hard work and dedication. And we'll continue to champion your work and your voices as well.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.